Okay, so this week I'm really excited to bring you Catherine Daigle. She actually has been a client of mine for a number of years. She started out as a student in New York City when I used to teach nutrition for actors. And in the past few years, we have sort of transformed her life. She grew up in New York City. She had studied acting and she decided to step off of that path. And since then, we've created a really exciting life for her. And I really thought it would be fun to share the journey, the tools, the experience of someone who had worked with me for a long period of time. So you guys enjoy it. She is a delight. She shares a lot of cool tools and insights. And yeah, here you go. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, Lianna.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling excited. I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited.
That's good. That's good. It's nervous because it's important, right? That's why we get
Yeah.
nervous.
Well, and it's the first of what I hope is many times.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Already I'm saying yes to that. Um, it's so nice to see your face. Happy New Year.
It's so nice to see you too. Happy New Year. I love it. Starting off 2024 fresh with you.
Exactly. It's funny. I think I reached out to you about coming on as a guest probably last summer at some point. Like I had the first thought because I have been so incredibly impressed and proud of you and your journey. And yeah, Catherine, we met, were you 23 years old?
Oh gosh. It would have been 2018. So whatever. Yeah, 23, 24, somewhere in there.
Yeah, yeah. And you were a student. That was your first year or second year at Maggie? First year?
First year. Yeah, it would have been my first semester of my first year.
Yeah, first semester of your first year at Maggie Flanagan, which for those who don't know is a really fabulous Meisner-based acting conservatory in New York City, where I used to teach a class called Nutrition for Performance. And you were just one of my students.
Yeah, I think there were 5 of us in that class.
Yeah.
And it was so fun because we just got to chat with you a couple of times a week and call it a day. It was great.
I know. I'm like cool teacher.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, okay, guys, don't eat gluten and this. And we would have fun catch-ups. But I remember, you were such a great student, so interested, so thoughtful. And really starting to develop self-awareness. And I remember I did a level 2 of the course and you took that as well, right?
Yep.
And during the time, like you had studied, so you're from New York City, right?
I am. Yeah. I was born in New Jersey, but my parents divorced when I was young. So I grew up splitting my time between the Upper West Side and Bergen County.
And you grew up wanting to be an actress?
Yes. I knew I loved theater. I knew I wanted to be involved. I originally started by taking all of my favorite books and adapting them into scripts. And then my mom said, okay, let's put her in theater. I loved that. But I wasn't really sure about performance as a career path. I had heard horror stories of just how do you afford to live a life? How do you have children? How do you maintain relationships? But then over time, I just kept choosing performance. I couldn't stop myself. So it just kind of kept happening. I always referred to it like acting was like an arm. Like I couldn't get rid of it. It was just there.
I understand. For up until the pandemic, well, I started to realize in like my early and mid 30s, I didn't love it as much, but it felt like a compulsion. It was just part 100%. Of me. There was like no option. I had to be an actor.
Exactly.
And it was interesting because you were unlucky. Was it your last or semester or something? It was during the pandemic, right?
My last semester at Maggie Flanagan.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So my last semester at Maggie Flanagan, the pandemic hit. We took a multi-week break where they were just trying to figure out how we were going to complete it. We ended up completing it over Zoom in July of 2020. And then there was an option to do a business program. And that was when you and I had that conversation that I still remember so vividly, where I was like, why don't I want to do this? And you were like, that's okay. That's enough. And I was like, what do you mean?
I know.
It was really emotional because it felt like that conversation was me like finally acknowledging that it wasn't something I was going to continue with.
Yeah, that was an incredible pivotal moment. And what I started coaching, the pandemic hit, obviously no one's acting because of COVID, and I started coaching a lot more and then like offering like really cheap coaching to a lot of my former students and clients. And that's when we started monthly in 2020. And it was in this, and I love our journey together because I think we've both grown a lot in this process. And I joke that like you are like my daughter that I never had or something, which it would have been gross because I would have been way too young to have a daughter your age. But on some level,
we could say like older sister or
right. But on some level, I feel like I've really helped have a hand in really you guiding you back to yourself and shaping like the woman that you've become, who I'm just repeatedly proud of over the past couple of years. And it has shown me, because as I've grown, because when I started this whole thing, right, like it really was holistic nutrition because of what had happened to me and my body. And as I'm someone who's like you, I think we both share this, really interested in continuing to learn, right? You get one skill, what's underneath the next, and why, that I just started getting more skills around helping people transform and become empowered. And as you stayed with me, I sort of shifted this trajectory, and we've really been working on building your dream life, I feel like, since 2020. And to me, I very vividly remember this conversation as well, because you were really grappling with, do I take, am I going to it was like a sliding doors moment, right? Where it's like, am I taking a right or a left? And they're bringing me in very different directions.
And I just remember the amount of confusion I felt, that my instinct was different than what I had always anticipated it would be, and not having an explanation for it. Like those are always my hardest moments, when I'm feeling like I want to do something, but I don't have a reason for it, or I don't understand why I'm feeling that way. And especially with something as big as your main passion in life, I remember just hitting a wall and being like, well, but this is what I've been wanting to do for 20 years. What do you mean I all of a sudden am not feeling drawn to it? It was so confusing.
And I get it. I feel like we've all had those moments where you're like, wait. And I mean, I definitely did, right? In my 30s, where I was like, oh, this thing I'd worked so hard to do, all of a sudden doesn't feel right anymore. And it's the bravery to step outside of that. And I think especially when we're young, we'll ignore that. And it was like, I felt a beautiful gift that I had the opportunity to guide you back to you. And this is where people get so off track, because it's like, oh, I'm going to ignore my body's signals. I'm going to ignore my intuition. I'm going to ignore how I feel about this because I've already decided I'm this person. And with that huge leap of faith and bravery, where I was allowed to sort of support you in connecting to this deeper part of you and I embarked on this whole new journey together.
Yeah. Well, and what's so funny to me is that a lot of times we think we're making this really giant leap, when in reality, we've already been doing it. Like you talk about transitioning from nutrition to coaching. And I think about our nutrition class. And our nutrition class, like, yes, you told us all about sugar, and you would give us packets and explain these things, but we would spend the majority of our classes with you essentially coaching us, and like barely even talking about nutrition. So the fact that like it was kind of split in half, those classes. So the fact that was happening, and then you were transitioning later on into coaching, you were already doing that.
Yeah, that's true.
Kind of how I feel about this too, is that the transition for me out of acting, well, like never say never, I could always return, but the transition out of acting had started years and years and years prior, in tiny little increments the whole way. And it wasn't as much of a leap as I ended up thinking that it would be.
Right. Because you still ended. So that it was so interesting, because very quickly after you made that decision, you got a job.
Yeah, pretty much like a week or two later.
Yeah.
Because I knew, I had a relationship, like a good working relationship with the CEO of the company that I now work for. I had known him when I was younger because I was an actor for the company. And I ended up emailing him and saying, hey, I would love to shadow you for a day, or just have coffee, catch up. And he had a job opening and offered it to me. So it was just kind of insane that what went from like my first step into exploring other things has now turned into a career. It's wild.
And what I think is really beautiful about this, and I want to point out, like, you can believe what you want to believe about life or not believe, right? But what you're talking about, I see over, and this is what started happening and got me really interested in broader things than just like holistic nutrition, was I would get people who are coming to me around their diet, and we'd start to get the root cause of why they want to change. They'd start making really just brave decisions, and the opportunities, like the amount of times I've seen someone have what you just described, be really boldly being like, I want to quit, or I want to do this other thing. And within weeks, months, even days, they get the next right step towards that direction. Like that is such a beautiful example of alignment. And when we have connection to that inner, that we'll trust ourselves and we go in that direction, it's unbelievable what happens. But we have to be brave enough to go against our brain sometimes.
And we have to be brave enough to deal with the really uncomfortable transition period where you just don't really know what's going on. And that period, like you're saying, could literally be a couple days. But especially when it comes to like ending relationships or quitting jobs, sometimes that period is a couple of months. And that can be really scary, but it always ends up being worth it, as you've seen a million times and as I've seen as well.
Yeah. And what was so incredible about what I've seen in the past 3 years from you, because when you started, you definitely had, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you feel like this is not, but I feel like a fair amount of anxiety and self-doubt that you would grapple with, right? Yeah. Like there was a lot of questioning, and that's a woman in your 20s, right? You're in New York City. Yeah. We're not really sure where our path is. It's very, very common. And what we started to do over the past couple of years was chip away at that. So initially, like with the position where you are now, the company you're in now, is like, still in the realm of theater, but you just had an entry level position, right? And then, so talk us a little bit through the past couple of years there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was brought on in October of 2020. So the rest of the team that I was on had been furloughed earlier in the year and then not brought back. So I think I was brought on partially because I could be at truly an entry level salary, as well as just starting fresh. The whole department was starting from the beginning. And I just learned really quickly. I understood that because other people had been furloughed, there was just this giant gap where the work just wasn't happening, or it was happening way slower than it should have. So I started to get really agitated about it, where I really just wanted to get it done. I wanted to figure out how to make it work. I wanted to take what was happening at the moment and make it better. And so I would just go to my boss at the time and say, hi, I had a nightmare about the fact that we didn't take care of this person. Can you help me teach me how to do this so that I can take care of them and take this off your plate? And it was like a year of training and just bugging people to teach me how to do things so that I could take care of people. Cause I was
I want to stop right there. Cause I knew, but I didn't realize how. That's incredible. And what made you go from someone who, again, wasn't always the most confident, wasn't always speaking up, you're in this new position. Was it because you loved it so much? Was it, what made you go above and beyond like that?
I really don't know. And there are still a lot of things about this position where I just don't know why it fits me so well, but I've never had a single issue motivating myself to do this every day.
Amazing.
Whereas I think, like you and I have talked about how when I was in middle school or high school, I really struggled with procrastination, not because I didn't love school, but because I didn't feel like time was my own. And I didn't, I had a really hard time motivating myself to do my calculus homework, whatever, but that just has never happened in this position. I had to figure out how to make it work. And I think it was really helpful too that, my department is essentially at the baseline a customer service department where we are offering the rights of our shows to high school theater teachers and community theater directors. So when people call and say, hi, I'm starting rehearsals on Monday, I need my materials, I feel just very baseline motivated to make sure that they have what they need to have a successful show. And I think it happened so many times where we weren't able to match expectations for people because we were understaffed and because it was COVID and we were dealing with a lot of cancellations and just a lot of messy, even finances. Like, what do you
Yeah.
give back to people? What do you retain? It was just a very messy time. So
Mhm.
I was just trying to make the mess not as messy. My mom is a professional organizer, so I
Oh, I
think
didn't. I don't think I even
um,
knew that. That's so funny. So it comes with the territory.
exactly. Well, and also being a kid of divorce, like I had maintained my own schedule when I was really young, so I've always been like, oh, here's a mess. I want to make it like just more
Organized. Right.
organized.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think basically that's how I was handling it. And then I had started technically part time because with COVID, they weren't able to pay 100%.
Mhm.
And then pretty quickly, I was the first person brought back on full time because there was so much work and they could
Yeah.
tell that I needed that extra time.
Yeah.
And I brought on a friend of mine to help, who was an actor at the time, of course, didn't have work because of COVID. So she came on and helped. And gradually, we just figured out a way to make the department function a little better. And then, yeah, and then I just got promoted again. And then there was some staffing changes where they hired someone else to lead the department. And then someone else left. And then that person who had been hired ended up going to the other department and they put me up. So it was just kind of a lot of movement. But now
Mhm.
I'm in a position where all of everything that I was handed, I now really every single day am able to improve upon and set new precedents and make it clear what our standards are and how we as a company and as a department can function with integrity and honor the contracts that we're entering into every day. I love it. I don't know.
I know, you can tell. And so at 29 years old, you're at a director level at a company you've only been with it a few years.
Yeah.
And it was your first serious job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't really seem real, but it's pretty great.
Well, it's and it was funny is we've been through this transition and these promotions together, and every
Yeah.
time it was really interesting to watch you rise to the occasion. And why
Yeah.
do you think you were able to do that so easily?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we've talked about it a lot, especially also what it means to be a woman working in a more
Yes.
male dominated world. And ironically, I mean, yes, I'm in theater, but also the theater business side still is male dominated. And I think I've just always in the back of my head understood fundamentally that if a man had been given what I was given, he wouldn't even bat an eye. He wouldn't even question whether or not he was ready for it. Like there are so many men who are deeply underqualified out there doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So I was like, if
Yes.
they can do that, then I know I have the skill set for these things. I'm just not willing to question myself. I still get imposter syndrome all the time, but I'm like, that's not something worth putting my energy towards. Like if a random man my age can manage something like this, then who am I to question myself on it?
I love that. That's absolutely right. And I was really proud of you this past fall because things got really real at work in terms of like the workload becoming quite overwhelming, and like you
Mm-hmm.
had people under you that you were starting to manage people, and
Yeah.
you had this moment of overwhelm. And I was
Yeah.
sort of looking at you because you were getting stretched in a lot of new directions. And I reframed it for you. And I'm like, this is actually really exciting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what you said to me? It's kind of
No.
random, so but it was so cute because you were so like just a little bit overwhelmed, frustrated, exhausted because you were
Yeah.
overworked, and it was like that time
Mm-hmm.
of year,
A little burnout. Yeah.
a little burnout happening.
Yeah.
And it was really sweet because I was like, this is actually really great because like look at like what's happening, and you're like, oh, I'm growing. This is why, right? Like it's so uncomfortable because I'm growing. And I was like, yes,
Yep.
yes. But it was like this beautiful reframe that we talk about this all the time, right? Every time
Mm-hmm.
something gets really uncomfortable, like the
Mm-hmm.
life that you're looking to create is always on the other side of that discomfort. And it
Yes.
was so cute because you're like frustrated, for, oh, Oh, you're
Oh,
right. Oh, this is
I'm
good, I guess.
expanding.
Yeah.
Damn it. Well, it always feels like, because I'm very visual in the way that I talk to myself and in the way that I understand things. And it always just felt like a ceiling that we talked
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
where every time I'm getting uncomfortable, it's because I'm just getting bigger and I have to figure out a way to expand the ceiling.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I remember that conversation too, because it always makes me feel better thinking that my discomfort is not without purpose and is
Yes.
not without like an end goal. Um,
Yeah.
that it always ends up being worth it, even though it's really not fun in the moment.
And you've seen that in our work together, right? Every moment of like
Hmm.
heartbreak and frustration over the past, gosh,
Oh yeah.
almost 4 years now. Can you speak to
Yeah,
that? Because we went through our relationship journey on this as well.
we did. Yeah. I mean, I think since when I originally met you, I was in one relationship and then that
Yeah.
relationship ended and I was in another one and then that relationship ended too. So you've seen a couple of different cycles.
Yes.
And I've always been surprised by how much relationships impact how you're handling the rest of your life. I mean, you always
Yeah.
talk about the primary foods, secondary foods, but it
Yeah.
really is a primary food. And
And for
those,
those who don't know, your primary foods, this came back from
yes.
my nutrition training. They always talk about it as your relationships, your career, and I always say slash purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They say exercise, I say relationship to your body, your movement, and they say spirituality, which I think you can kind of, it can mean a lot of different things to
Yeah.
you, even like you're just a relationship to your internal world, right? And your
Yeah.
primary foods are the things, if those are in balance, you're
Yeah.
going to be healthy almost effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they're out of balance, you're going to have cravings in your secondary foods, which are things like
Mm-hmm.
actual, food that you eat,
Right.
alcohol, even drugs, anything you can consume, right? So my goal always was looking at the big picture in life and how do you balance those primary foods so you stay happy. And now we know happiness, the more happiness, joy, all those things, they're healing
Yeah.
emotions, they're regulating emotions. So yeah, speak to, so
Yeah.
you're noticing how much, yeah, you had a pretty stressful sort of long term, like drawn out breakup a couple of years
Kind of.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was ultimately, I think about both of my past relationships is with gratitude first and foremost.
Yes.
But I think that it's so tricky that you can be in positions where your needs aren't getting met, but you're still really attached to
Yeah.
your both the person, or even you could say the same for careers. Like I was
Yeah.
attached to being an actor,
Yep.
even though being an actor was never going to be able to meet my needs.
Hmm.
Um,
And
and
isn't that interesting that you were able to realize that at such a young age?
yeah, I mean, thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like most of the time when we're uncomfortable with something, that's why. Like something isn't being met, and we have to
Yeah.
just allow everything to look a little different than what we thought it would.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, the relationships I were in both were really difficult in their own regard, but also really wonderful in their own regard. And I'm just really grateful that I don't know, that I was able to learn from them and through them really understand what I do want and need.
Yes. Yes.
Because those needs and those wants weren't being met, I know how to meet them for myself, but I also know how to ask other people to meet them.
Yeah. I mean, I look at you and I'm like, was I was engaged at 29, but I was like such a messier human that did not know myself as well as you do. And
Yeah.
to like hearing you speak about this and like even guiding you through that breakup last time, it was
Yeah.
so beautiful to watch how maturely you handled it. And you were so incredibly brave.
Thank
And I
you.
think that there was something really interesting about you living. Can you speak to, because there was a number of months of uncertainty in that.
Yes. Yeah.
And can you speak to that experience and maybe what was helpful tool wise or what you learned from it? Because I think
Yeah.
uncertainty is a thing that we all struggle with a lot.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, it's a really big part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there were good portions of the entire relationship that were based in uncertainty. But there was a period of really like almost 8 to 9 months where I just didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was happening, and
there was
whether or
some
not
distance involved, which was
exactly.
part of it, right?
Yeah. And I think I look back on that time now, and I would almost expect myself to be like, oh, the horrors, that was really difficult. But I actually look back at it, I have really fond memories from that entire time, because I feel like the uncertainty made me really dig into myself. I was like, okay, this relationship for the short term, at the very least, cannot give me what I need because we are uncertain. So I used that time. I mean, I moved out, I moved apartments twice during that time. My friendships got a lot stronger. I made sure I was reading more books. I fed myself better. It really, I was forced to really take care of myself in a way that I hadn't been. So that's what's so funny. I think that's what really helped me that whole time is, of course, I was really struggling emotionally in certain ways, but I also feel like I was really stabilizing myself. Like I look back at that time and I'm like, I did so much in the span of 6 to 8 months. That was when I got promoted the first time. That was when I moved. Like I just looked to the rest of my life to stabilize me rather than looking to my relationship. And it ended up working out because that relationship ended and I still had a stable life to hold me up when I was going through the grieving process.
Which is such a gift.
Such a gift.
Just to have the tools and awareness to do that, because I think it's so easy to put so much into relationships, and when they're falling apart, everything around you is crumbling. And here you were using your tools to sort of build yourself up outside of it. Which was incredible to watch from here.
I still think about it now too, that independent of what is going on in my life, or if I'm stressed at work, or if something is happening with a friend or family, I think I am still leaning on the life that I've created during that time. Every single thing I had, like we talk about how lucky I feel that have this kind of dream life for myself. And it doesn't mean that there's joy and love and happiness every day.
Right.
It just means that like the dream life is the dream because it can hold me up during harder times. Like I imagine that if there were to be some tragedy, God forbid, there would be things ready waiting for me, just holding me up the whole time. And that's what I feel very grateful for.
Well, I just think it's such a beautiful reminder, right? We have, yes, life is full of uncertainty. There are things that are, so many things that are out of our control, but there's so many things we do have control over in terms of how we, treat ourselves, our bodies, our minds, right? The community, the support systems we create, the systems we create in general. And I just continue to be impressed with and our journey to empower you to understand that. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about your just experience with me and like from Maggie to now, like what have you taken from it? What has been the most valuable? What have you been surprised by? Any of that?
Yeah, I think that, I also see a therapist, which is amazing. We love therapy.
Yes.
And he is a really important part of my life. But I was feeling, especially during COVID, when none of us really had much else to do. I didn't have a job. I was in class maybe once or twice a week. Like I just didn't have enough energy or didn't have enough things to do. And I felt like what I needed and what I was missing from therapy was a very purposeful, guided, like this is something I want to accomplish and this is how I'm going to do it in a month span.
Yes.
Whereas therapy is meant to be not as concrete as that.
Yes.
And so that's originally why I had wanted to talk to you, is because I wanted someone to say, okay, so you want to minimize your social media usage. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's all of the different ideas. I wanted a space where I could go and just brainstorm and go ahead and like intellectualize my life a little bit and then figure out how to improve upon it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's been so great is that every month when we talk, I have a couple notes of like, here's the recap. Like here, I can't wait to tell Lianna the tea. Like here's the, like all the fun stuff that happened. But also it's an opportunity for reflection, looking back at the entire month and saying, okay, you know what? I really struggled with self-trust. I really struggled with XYZ. And I know that Lianna is going to have some little nugget that then I can hold on to for the following month. And I remember, like you had mentioned, the end of 2023 was really difficult for work. I was just pushed to my absolute max. And I remember talking to you and being like, Lianna, like I am struggling to feed myself. Like I don't have time to shower. Like this is not great. What do I do? I have to fix this. Like how dare I not be able to feed myself? And you said, you're like, Catherine, it's finals week. Like, it's okay. You're allowed to have periods where you can't like uphold all of your standard routines. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the rest of December was obviously very difficult, but I still was like, I'm in finals week. I can feed myself in a couple weeks. I can worry about going back to my norm when I get out of the craziness. And I think that's just an example, but I feel like that's been the best part of it is knowing that I can say, hey, Lianna, I need X and you will give me X. And then that'll last me for a month. And then we're good for the next time around. Because again, therapy is amazing. And I would be nowhere without my therapist. But it's also it's just not meant to be purposeful in the same way. So knowing that I can say, I need a quick fix, Lianna. I just need like a mantra. I need this. I need a routine.
Tools.
I need an idea. It's like a quicker path for me to pair with therapy.
I think it's really like we all should have a team on some level. And that doesn't have to be you're paying them, right? But you need to have the people that you go to when you need to be a little bit more coddled, right? You need someone who's going to tell you the truth. You need a space to feel your feelings. And I think therapy's I did so much therapy for such a long time. And you get to a point where, like you, I was like, I need to figure out, like, I get what happened. I get now why I'm the way this, whatever. I don't care anymore. What do I do about it? Right. Where it's like, what are the tools? How can I move forward? I don't want to look backwards anymore. And that's sort of the difference. I feel like both being incredibly valuable, but like, how do we look at what's happening and move you forward? And so what are some of the favorite tools that we've created or you've gotten from this that you use on a regular basis? And it can be very simple to like your diet to, mindset, all of that. And I know they continue to change as you do.
Yeah. I feel like the things that we've ended up diving the most into are all of the weird little analogies that work for me. I just have I don't know, my mind is very visual, but I also just need kind of stories to attach to those visuals. And then it just makes things easier. So I think the thing we've always talked about, or that at least that I developed more with you, was the idea of the pool and the lake.
I knew I was like, I'm going to bring the pool. Someone's got to bring the pool up.
I
love it. Yes.
It still isn't like, it doesn't make 100% sense, but it works. So I'm just rolling with it. It feels like, the idea of the pool was that you have a shallow end and a deep end. This kind of came out of the work that you had done with the human being store. Human and being and the fact that there are just different modes that we're in.
So with that, I worked, just for those who have maybe not heard this or heard I did an episode with Kathleen actually in the very beginning.
Oh, good.
Which was fun. But they always talked about, it was sort of like life coaching with like a personal leadership and development spin on it. And the logo was the infinity sign. And I still take so much of this with me, right? where
Yeah.
the idea was like the one side of the infinity side was sort of your human side and the other side was the being, and where they intersect is your gift, right? And she
Mm-hmm.
would call that like your talents, strengths, skills, the area of your life that you just flow in. When we were trying to help people figure that out, and it's so cute because you kind of like already naturally segued into this for yourself, but it's like she would always say, what's the thing you can't help doing that you do at Starbucks, that you do at a party, that you do standing in line, where, you know, I'm like always helping empower and give resources and talk to people about what's going on, that, right? You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
organize things and make solutions and, you know, clean up messes. You know, we all have these different things. And the idea is if we are balanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we are both human and being meaning connected to what we really want, our purpose, what we're driven by, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have a real clarity in your being and you're connected to your gifts, you can create something in the world on the human side, and you want to be balanced on both sides to A, be, you know, productive in the world, but B, to be really fulfilled and satisfied. So we were getting people like understanding their gifts, connected, and getting them flowing between the two. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you were coming to a lot of human being store meeting or Zooms
Yeah.
that we had during the
Because they
pandemic, which was
made them
awesome.
complementary, I
Yeah,
think,
they did.
for a couple
Yep.
periods. And I was like,
Yep.
it was so helpful to just have a space where we had a group that we would just chat with about however we were experiencing the pandemic. But that's kind of where to me, the pool image started, where it's not that the human is better than the being or the being is better than the
You're right.
human.
We need
It's
both.
you need both. And that's kind of the idea of the pool. There are going to be times where you have to be in the shallow end, and there are going to be
Mm-hmm.
times where you have to be in the deep end. And the idea of the shallow end is that's the time when you need something beneath you to keep you up. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have scaffolding that is supporting you. You have to have your people. You have to have your routines. That's the time when you pay extra close attention to making sure that you're treating your body well. That's when you like go back to the basics,
Mm-hmm.
and you need that time in order to be able to like swim freely at other points. And the idea that neither side is better than the other, I think so much of the time, especially as women, we like chastise ourselves for when we need to take a break, or chastise ourselves for needing more support or
Mm-hmm.
needing help, or needing to ask for help, when in reality, like, there is nothing inherently ethical or moral about being in the shallow end or being in the deep end. It is just a damn pool.
Yes.
So that was big for me, understanding too what I needed in order to feel like I had ground beneath me, like
Mm-hmm.
what makes me feel supported. Like like reading a book every
Mm-hmm.
night before I go to sleep makes me feel really supported.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm in the deep end running around like crazy, I probably don't have the time to do that every night. But
Mm-hmm.
when I go back to the shallow end, I'm like, let me start a new book. Let me make sure I'm reading a certain number of pages. It's a routine thing for me.
Yeah, yeah. What are some others, just to give people examples? I mean, everyone's going to have different
Yeah.
ones, but I think when we're specific, sometimes it's helpful to other people. So, what are
Um,
some of your other scaffolding or shallow end behaviors that work for you?
Time with my friends,
Mm-hmm.
time with my family,
Mm-hmm.
a really good meal.
Mm. Well, and
I
wait,
love
elaborate.
food.
Yeah, what's like a really good
Like,
meal for Catherine?
oh my gosh, I don't even, it changes based on my mood, but like I want to go to a restaurant, and it doesn't even
Mm-hmm.
have to be an expensive one, but I just want to savor my food. And
Mm.
I want to be happy with what I'm putting in my body, but also
Mm-hmm.
sometimes savoring my food is like fried chicken and pancakes, and like that's
Yes.
fantastic too.
Yep.
But having like good company and a good meal,
Mm-hmm.
especially if I come home at the end of the day and I know I'm going to eat well, it's like a huge boost in confidence. And
Mm.
that's why, like, when we had talked about finals week and me struggling to eat, that was really impacting me, not because I usually am so brilliant at feeding myself in the first place, but because I love coming home and knowing that I'm eating well.
Yeah. Yeah.
um so yeah, I love a good meal. Like if I know that I'm going to have dinner with my parents, with my dad or my stepmom or my mom, or with my family or friends, and I know that I'm going to have a good meal, that's like a ticket
Yes.
to feeling supported for me. But also like seeing you and seeing my therapist, and
Yeah.
knowing that like sometimes support and scaffolding looks like saying, hey, this is what I need. Can you provide this to me right now?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, those are, I think food is pretty big.
For me too. For me
Give
too.
me a big bowl of pasta and I'll be perfectly happy.
And not me. That would make me die.
Yeah.
Unless it's like gluten-free pasta, and even then.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's why we're all different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I, you know what is also really important, and I feel like we've talked about this a little bit. Do you know? I think where we sometimes can get in trouble is when we're maybe accidentally staying too long in the deep end or the shallow end. Like when do you start to notice, right, that maybe you're a little tired and you need to go to the shallow end? Do you have some like inner alarms that go off, like when you're like, oh no, my body's telling me something, or my anxiety is telling me something? Like what comes up for you?
Yeah. I notice I'm very prone to numbing. I'm very prone to like going on social media and zoning out, or even like being in the middle of work or being in the middle of an interaction with a friend and just feeling like I can't be present. That's usually the first idea that I'm on the wrong side. But it's tricky. It's kind of, I'm at the point now where it's not really a conscious choice. I just kind of go between the two. There are times where it's like, oh, I'm in the shallow end for an hour today. And sometimes I'm in the shallow end for like a whole month. I feel like January is such a shallow end month, but in the best way. Like I am spending so much time on my own. I'm reading my books. I'm savoring just kind of hibernating a little bit. So it goes along also with the schedule. Sometimes I'm in a schedule where I just have to be in the deep end. But like, I remember there was a week last year, and it had happened the year before too, where it's always a week in October, and I always have 2 different galas. And this past year I had 2 galas in a row and 3 shows in 1 week. And I was like, why did I do this to myself? It was completely unintentional, but that was a week where I had to be in the deep end for my life. But my time on my own, I was like very shallow end. I made sure that I came home the second I could. I didn't extend any social gatherings like, oh yeah, let's grab another drink. No, I was like, I have to be rigid with myself. Otherwise I will not make it through. So it's like a daily constant balance, but I feel like I have a little part of my brain that just tells me which one I need to be focusing on.
Yeah, well, and I've watched you cultivate that in the past few years, right?
Yeah.
And I liked that you're and like I'm endlessly impressed because I feel like you have more self-awareness and control over yourself than I work with, women 10, 20 plus years older than you that come, you know what I mean? Like, and I think the exciting part for me is being part of your team early on and helping you develop that. And I feel very passionately about, like, if we can get to, I mean, I want to help all women, but especially younger women, because I struggled so much in my 20s, to help to give a framework of empowerment in this way, because you do, and you said it earlier, like, you have a life that you really love, and you notice when you start to go into, exhaustion, numbing, avoiding, where you're like, oh, I have my scaffolding. I'm going to swim back to the shallow end. I'm going to do the things that support me. And I think for years, without that awareness, so many people stay in the deep end and drown. Right.
Well, and also there are just so many people. I've noticed this with my friends. I've noticed this with myself, where the first reaction is to just be judgmental of whichever space that we're in. It's definitely something that the patriarchy has partially programmed into us, but it's like, oh, how dare I be exhausted? Or like, why am I exhausted? I have to get up the energy. I have to make this happen. Or why do I need this support? There's so much shame in wherever we are. But there's this creator on TikTok, I forget her name, but she wrote the book, How to Clean the House While Drowning, something similar to that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And one of her main points is that the house being clean is not a moral thing. The trash is, when it's full versus when it's empty, is equal. It is still just a trash bin fulfilling its purpose. And I kind of apply the same thing to the rest of my life. It's like, okay, me being tired is just me being part of the cycle. There's no
Mm-hmm.
shame in being exhausted. There's no shame in needing a break or in being burnt out or in being overscheduled or underscheduled. It's
Mm-hmm.
just all part of it. This is what it's
Yes.
like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
rather than saying, "Oh, I need X. How dare I need X?" It's
Mm-hmm.
like, "No, this is what I need. I'm going to go get it, and then I'll need something else, and then I'll go get that." Like it's just there's no there's no shame to that. There's no morality to that.
And what is incredible that you're explaining right now, I think, is so huge. And again, especially women, it takes us a really long
Yeah.
time to understand this. Like the amount of empathy and gentleness and literal radical self acceptance that you are
Yeah.
bringing to your how you care for yourself is
Yeah.
something I wish everyone had, because I think the thing we don't understand is we, again, especially as women, will get harder and harder on ourselves, meaner and meaner, more restrictive, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's trying to solve a problem at the level of the problem, right? But when
Right.
we can be really accepting and of where we are, the only way you can change anything is accepting the reality of it first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And relaxing into it. Because if you're fighting the situation, you're in denial, you're fighting the problem. Again, we're in the same,
Yeah.
we're spinning our wheels, we're creating more stress. But here you are going through these massive growth periods again and
Yeah.
again with this toolkit, which is the thing I really preach the most, which with this radical self-acceptance and with this gentleness that,
Yeah.
hey, as a 20-something-year-old woman in New York City, most of you don't have this. So like you should feel incredible about that.
Thank you. I mean, it's really hard. I just like this past week, I feel like I was really high on self-doubt, high on lack of trust. But
Mm-hmm.
those are my Achilles heels, so it's not
Mm-hmm.
shocking. But I think having the support the way that I have means that I can handle those things
Mm-hmm.
with a little bit more chill.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
having a week where I'm struggling with self-trust, like it's not fun,
Right.
but I know it's temporary and I know that other things will eventually help me rebuild that
Mm-hmm.
or help me in any given situation. So I think being gentle with myself across the board helps me when I start being harsher with myself
Mm-hmm.
naturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
yeah.
it does. Kind of goes back to how we do one thing is how we do everything. So if
Yeah,
we're practicing being worried all the time,
exactly.
when shit gets real, we're worried even more, right? But if you're
Exactly.
practicing self-acceptance and gentleness, you're still bringing an element of that when things get stressful and we go back to our old habits. So that's incredible.
Exactly. And one of the things that we've talked about pretty extensively over the years is the fact that we all kind of naturally fall into different spaces mood wise.
Yeah.
I feel like this was originally maybe a Joe Dispenza thing where you
Yeah.
have the main moods that you fall into
Right,
naturally.
emotional addiction, which yeah,
Emotional
there's a lot of
addiction.
people talk
Yeah.
about this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
The small range of emotions that feel like us, right? That came
mhm,
from how we grew up, right? We had a certain set of circumstances that made us
mhm,
feel more comfortable. Some people are happier, some people more
mhm,
angry. Everyone's a bit different, right? So going back
mhm.
to your, emotional addiction, yes.
Yeah. And training myself to have them be just a little bit different because you can't, I mean, that's a very long, difficult task to completely rewrite,
Mm-hmm.
but putting myself in a position where the rest of my life supports me being in moods that I'm happy with.
Yes.
Because that, I mean, again, you go back to the primary foods, you go back to relationships, careers,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that my life right now supports me making my main moods happy ones
Mm-hmm.
is a joy because then when I'm not in a good mood, it doesn't feel like it's because my life has done that to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
feels like that's a part of life. You're never going to always be in a perfect mood, but my life supports me choosing the right mood.
Yeah, and I know I love it. It's incredible that you bring this up because you talked about the ceiling before too, and what I
Exactly.
get
Yeah.
really excited about with you, especially because what we continue to co-create for you
Mm-hmm.
is expansion of that ceiling. And with that, when we bump against that ceiling and we expand beyond it, it's not just, ooh, I've never done this before, I'm afraid, or I've never taken this challenge before, I've never had to learn this new thing. But in that ceiling is also our capacity for love, joy, self-expression, gratitude. And what I watched you start as a much more internal, anxious woman who was not as confident. And in only not even under 4 years, watched you become this fully expressed, embodied, confident woman who isn't worried about dating, who is going to put exactly what she wants out there, who puts energy into her friends, who continually takes on bigger and bigger responsibility at work. And I think one of the things that I've seen is the through line is your ability to trust yourself and do exactly what you just said a couple of minutes ago, is when you're in self-doubt, when you see those places where you go specifically, that for me, I think we all have those moments of self-doubt, or, whenever things are stressful, we go to a little bit more of a negative place. You now have that structure, have that framework, have that shallow end of the pool to get yourself out of it.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because I do feel like self-trust has been kind of the main thing we've worked through, because I just don't know why, but it is a very difficult thing for me.
And everyone else on the planet.
Yes, I know. But still, it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard, because I just never want, I think maybe I just intellectualize it too much, but I see all of the examples of implicit bias when it comes to racism or whatever. And I get that confused with your instinct. And I think I'm now in a position where I can catch when I'm falling into those traps and then just hit pause and then see what happens in a couple of days, and not blame myself for when I fall into those traps, because clearly they're my Achilles heel, but also maybe not define myself by them. That's a continuously tricky thing, but I think that's okay.
What are you at this point really excited about working on or working through sort of for this year? And it doesn't have to be like resolution or anything. Yeah. Like, what are you excited about taking on, or what's personally something that you'd like to grow and develop?
I think when it comes to trust, it feels like I pretty naturally make myself incorrect in any given situation. I'm very quick to say, oh, well, I could have handled this better, or here's how I could have done this differently. And then kind of gotten mad at myself for not being capable of something like that. So I think I'm in a position now where I don't want to get mad at myself for how I'm handling things. I think I handle things across the board pretty much as well as I could. And that doesn't mean I'm immune to error, obviously, but I just don't want to, if someone else can be the one to make me wrong, not me. Like, if someone wants to say, hey, Catherine, you didn't handle that, then great. I'll take that feedback. But like, why am I the one saying, oh, Catherine, why'd you do that?
I love that. Let's all take that on. Let's all take that on, right? And I think one of those things too is just going back, because I think in retrospect, we immediately like, well, that was dumb, or like, like I could, but
why was that so difficult? It should have been easy. Like, but
instead being like, and I think a really great antidote to this is, in that moment, was I doing the best I could with the information that I had and the tools that I had? And I think that's a beautiful mantra to have around that. And I think, I do that too, right? Or the amount of times we'll be in a situation and someone will like have a slightly different idea or maybe correct something, and I'm the one who was right and I knew it. And I was like, but I'll defer to them, because I'm like, I'm always open to learning, and I want to, if it's something's my fault, I'll always like cop to it. But I can fall into that trap too, where I was like, I knew we should have left earlier, or I knew we should have done this, or the whole time I had this like quiet internal, gnawing feeling or sensation or whisper that felt like things should go in a different direction. Why am I not listening to it?
Exactly.
But having that self-compassion is super important.
And
And
giving
then,
yourself the space to even listen to that voice,
yes.
because I feel like I want to be trying this thing where whenever I hit those moments of doubt, where I just sit down and say, okay, I'm here to listen. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you want to tell me. Clearly there are voices inside me that are trying to get out. So let me just sit. I'll journal or not. Let me just sit and let me just be in conversation. There's another great book. I can't remember if we'd ever talked about it, but I think it's called like Tea and Cake with Demons or something.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
have brought it up.
And it's all about just having a conversation with those insecurities and seeing what they have to say, because the voices start sounding incredibly rational when you're able to just have a back and forth conversation with them. And so that's another big thing that I feel like is important. The more that I can sit down and say, okay, why am I feeling weird about this situation? Tell me. And then go from there.
Well, and I think you're again bringing up something incredible, which is separating ourselves from all of these different thoughts and fears and parts, right?
Yeah.
Because I think in the beginning, we just think everything is us. And this is what I really believe, or this is what I really think. And the more you realize that, ooh, when I'm more stressed or hungover, or haven't slept as much, or, there's a lot more going on, those voices are louder and different, or maybe meaner. Maybe they're more fear-based, right, than other times in life. So really differentiating yourself from that chatter and knowing when to calm down and be like, okay, fine, I'm going to write it out. Give me your worst, brain. Like, tell me what's happening. So you could rationally like get it out of there and be like, oh, wow, this is kind of crazy. Or this is where journaling practices, I think, are incredible. The more we keep them up over periods of things where things are really good and things are down, things are stressful, things are wonderful, you'll just notice patterns around how you talk to yourself, your fears, your thoughts. So like, you have a really beautiful awareness around what your Achilles heels are. Right. So then you're like, ooh, more self-doubt. This is my thing.
Yeah.
How do I take care of myself? This is a little red flag that I need to go to the shallow end a little bit, wander around, catch my breath before I can go swim out there again. So I think that's incredible.
And how do I put myself in situations where those things are less likely to happen?
Yes.
Like, I don't need, like, especially you talk about dating, like it's very easy for me to end up going on a couple dates with someone who triggers those things. And that's not their fault. Like those Achilles heels pop up, the self-doubt, self-trust. I'm like, well, I'm perfectly happy in my own life. Why would I spend my time like this? I could just end up maybe dating someone who doesn't trigger those things.
Right. I can look at them. Why am I continuing? And I think this is the work that you and I'm so excited to be at this place with you, because what we're continuing to do is, how do we, as you become more confident, more happy, more joyful, less anxious, as you identify these bigger goals and things that you want out of life, all we're doing is just expanding your joy ceiling. And as you learn and grow and evolve and you figure out what your needs are, all we're doing is we're just, okay, like, how do we support you being a little bit more, feeling more free or more rested? And we just create this life around you that supports exactly what you said, what you're wanting to accomplish in the moment. And then your baseline just continues to get up. And like you said before, there are always going to be days where you feel like total shit and you hate yourself and bad stuff. But when you have the community, the job, the movement practices, the sleep, those, you stay down much lower, right? Your highs are much higher. They continue to get high and you stay up there. And I think that the really cool place you've gotten to too, and I had this conversation with someone yesterday, right? We think about life, right? Like at first, in this process of, okay, those really moments where I'm like hit on the floor crying, or something is like really the rock bottom moments where things feel really hard. Like I don't like them, but I see in the distance, in the background, when I'm beyond them, what they're doing for me. And then you start to see, like, the more you're allowing the lows to come in, the highs get higher. And then, but we're still judging it as like, highs are good, lows are bad, highs are good, and I want to escape lows. And I was talking about, like, how do we flip this around? Like, we're just going left and right and everything's neutral. If we can just stay a bit detached, everything's a bit neutral. And even how do we find the beauty in the quote unquote lows, knowing that this is a full life experience that's going to catapult us in the other direction and show us something even more beautiful. And I watch you now walk this path.
Shallow end, deep end.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. There's no, it's going to be a part of life. And what matters more is figuring out how to handle that and what tools you need in order to make the flow between the two not be so drastic or devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, this has been so incredible. Okay, I have two more questions for you before we wrap this up. One
Go
is,
for it.
what are you most proud of yourself for doing in the past couple of years or since we started? Like, what are you most proud of creating?
It's kind of a cop out to say all of it, but I think that when I was younger and when I met you, I didn't really fully have a vision for what I needed my life to be. So what I'm proud of is somehow creating that without actually having the vision. It's not like I had a list of these are the things that I need and here's how I'm going to feel. I didn't do a lot of like manifesting. I just spent time putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not like I sat down at age 23 and said, when I'm 29, I want to have this life. And it just kind of happened because I was, I guess, doing the right things for myself at the right time.
Oh, wait. Okay, go on. And I want to elaborate on this.
That's I'm proud of the fact that like most people create their dream lives because they have this vision of what the dream life is going to look like. It's like Barbie's dream house. You know what you want it to look like, but I didn't really know what I wanted it to look like. I knew bits and pieces, and then I did those bits and pieces, and then led to other bits and pieces, and it kind of happened without me really knowing what was going on.
Well, I think this is a full testament to what I sort of preach to my clients, is that it almost doesn't matter. But if you have your scaffolding, right? You know, when you're in the shallow and the deep end, you know how to take care of yourself. And you take the space, like you said, to listen to those thoughts and continue to connect to yourself and deal with what's coming up for you. But at the end of the day, you stay connected to yourself, you care for yourself, and you put one foot in front of the other and allow you, your body, your instincts, you in that moment to guide you forward. It will create a beautiful life. And you, without even being prompted, just said that.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that because that's at the core how I base my life, what I believe, what I sort of encourage people to do. And I think on some level, this has been why I feel just more and more proud of you all the time, is I watched you do this, right? And it wasn't, I'm just, holding space, reflecting things back, giving you tools, but just sort of, gently pushing you forward in the direction of what you want. And in a short number of years, you created that.
Yeah. That's
incredible.
Wild.
Right?
I think, I think with creating that, I'm very proud of the amount of hope that I feel, because I think that, early on, like 5 or 6 years ago, I think I would have said oh, hope is so scary. You might get disappointed. You don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, you used it. We had this conversation so many times. You're like, but what if, I was like, what if I get my hopes up and it doesn't happen? And I'm like, something better will.
Exactly. And I really didn't believe that. And now I definitely do.
That's success.
I think that comes with having the life kind of line up a little bit better. It genuinely feels like, of course, I don't know what's going to happen. Of course, I could be wildly disappointed by a number of things, but I know what to return to, and I know what I need, and I know how it feels, and I know how to recreate it. If I end up in some horrible situation, I can get myself back to here.
I love that. And that is something that no one can take away from you, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. That understanding of yourself, your needs, your communication, of the scaffolding that you need. That's the key to you, with or without me or your therapist or a partner or anyone else, creating a life that you truly want. And that's, self-empowerment, which is so exciting. Mm-hmm. And the final question we ask all of our guests here is, you've pretty much answered it, but again, first thing that comes to mind, I always say, is the right thing. Yeah. as we know, as we've been talking about, there is the one guarantee in life is that, it will hand you lemons sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
How do you love through challenging situations? How do you make lemonade? What's your favorite tool?
I should have prepared an answer.
It's even more fun. You could be like pizza.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter.
Pasta. No. Oh gosh. It's hard. It's really hard to describe, but what comes to my mind is Bell Hooks's definition of love, which is loving as a verb rather than as a noun. Love is not like some kind of finite, clear entity, but it's like a daily choice, a daily decision, and a moment to moment decision of I love myself by, I don't know, by buying a treat for myself at the grocery store. But sometimes sometimes I love myself by not buying that treat. It depends on the day, and understanding that what love looks like can change so drastically at any given time. And allowing love's definition to be very fluid. I think that's, when life gives me lemons, it's like, well, what does love mean to me right now? And how can I do that?
That is an incredibly gorgeous answer. So I'm glad we just put you on the spot. Oh, Catherine, this has been so much fun. We'll definitely have to do it again. And, when you have, who knows what next incredible thing you're going to create in your life next. And you can be a beautiful expander for people.
We'll see. I'm excited.
But I'm so proud of you, like I said a million times.
I'm really proud of you. You've come so far too. And it's been so cool to watch. I mean, everything that you've gone through in the past handful of years as well is pretty significant. And I'm glad that we're kind of in it together.
I mean, and that's what I really liked. I remember there was a period of time where I thought about becoming a therapist. And there was something I really liked about coaching. And I fell into it, right? It wasn't something I thought I really was going to pursue. But the one thing they talked about with coaching, they're like, oh, no, you're just a couple steps ahead of your clients turning around and like offering a hand. And like, so it is a communal growth, healing, development process where you guys all move in the same direction. So it does feel like we're all on the same team. And even in watching your growth, or, me supporting you, I grow. So thank you. You've been my longest consistent client. Like I've had clients that will work for a couple of years, they'll come back and like I'll have repeat. Like that's been happening actually a lot recently, which is so exciting as people come in different but watching you consistently evolve and grow into the woman you are today just makes me really excited for the future. It makes me really excited for, if you do, for who you are in the community of women that you're in, if you should choose to have children, what kind of children you'd raise. It just makes me hopeful about the future. So I feel really, thank you for letting me be a part of your team and your scaffolding. And I look forward to checking in a few weeks and hearing all the behind the scenes stuff that we didn't want to share on the podcast. All right. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Love you. Mwah.
Thank you.